Welcome, everyone. So we're going to get started. So thank you so much for coming out here this morning, this lovely, cold November morning. I'm Joseph Kopczynski. I'm a professor of architecture. Yeah. I'm a professor of architecture and the director of civic engagement and service learning here at UMass. I'm also one of the co-editors of the book that we're celebrating today. So we are very excited to be here today to celebrate the publication of anti-racist community engagement principles and practices. And you'll hear a lot about the book today, first from my wonderful colleague and lead editor, Christina Santana, as well as from some of the, as well as from some of the amazing authors, UMass-based authors that are here today and will present on their chapters. So we have a very simple agenda today. For the first part, we'll hear from our author panel, and then do some Q&A, and then we'll take a short break, and then we do want this to be interactive, so we want to engage all of you in roundtable discussions. And the agenda is outlined in your program, so if everyone has a program, you can follow along and see exactly what we're going to be doing today. So just a couple things about today's launch. The book was published at the end of September of 2023, and we had a virtual launch through Campus Compact, who's the publisher. And a lot of the editors are all Massachusetts-based, and decided we also wanted to do some regional book launches. So this is one of, I think, 4 or 5 that are happening across Massachusetts. And it's really an opportunity for us to introduce the book to our communities, right? So our communities of community members, faculty, students, staff, and begin a conversation that is a part of the emphasis of the book is really looking at what does anti-racist community engagement look like, and what does it look like on your campuses and the work that you do. So that's really the context of what we're doing here today. So to get us started off this morning, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Javier Reyes, who's completing his first semester, so he's a freshman, as the Chancellor of the University of Massachusetts Amherst. So Chancellor Reyes is an economist who has devoted his career to the cause of public higher education, holding leadership positions at the University of Illinois Chicago, West Virginia University, and the University of Arkansas. He most recently served as the interim chancellor of UIC, Chicago's largest university campus. Born and raised in Mexico, he's the first Hispanic Latino to serve as the chancellor of UMass Amherst. So please join me in, once again, a round of applause in welcoming Chancellor Reyes to the platform.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And it's always great to still think about it's just been 6 months, right? It's my first semester. I was seeing some of the students out there, and as I was coming in, I ran into a student that happened to be a freshman, and I said the same thing. I'm a freshman too, and he looked at me like didn't get my joke, and I'm like, I think it's a good one, but I think it's audience dependent. But I do want to say thank you to all of you, and welcome to this important event. When you think of the idea of launching a book that has what I would say not only the right topic, but also when it comes at the right time, I think it's a very, very, very important event for a university where you have panelists, where you have scholars, where you have students, and where you can quickly see the impact of this scholarship across our campus and across our disciplines and across our universities. So I would like to extend a special welcome to the panelists and thank them in advance for what I know was not an easy task. It was not an easy gather all this information, put it in a way that you can disseminate it to all of us and put it out there in a way that would be not only impactful, but can also be applicable quickly. So thank you so much also for bringing that conversation to our campus. As you know, UMass Amherst, we attract students from for all 50 states. but also from about 115 different countries. And we're committed to bringing community engaged, being a community engaged university, and to fostering an environment where all members not only feel welcome, but see themselves in our community and find the spaces where they can not only interact with their community, but also interact with other communities and see themselves belonging in all our university and in all our spaces. I think that this book is an excellent resource to guide that work, to guide that kind of mindset that we want to have in the university. With contributions from a diverse range of academic voices, the book offers what I would say is a thoughtful examination of anti-racist, community-engaged pedagogy and practices. And I had to write down sort of what I think and how the book is organized in the key principles as the authors put them together. When you look at reframing institutional practices, promoting intra and interpersonal critical reflection, intentional learning and course design, cultivating compassionate and reflective classrooms. When you look at all these 4 principles, they apply broadly to not only within our campus, not only within our classes, not only within a community around our university, but you can think of any community. You can think of any organization that is trying to work and engage their community, whatever that might be around them, and it has complete applicability for this. So I applaud this holistic approach by the authors and really encourage everyone to not only take a look at the book, but also think about this message of how can you apply it within your communities? How can you really, really look forward to putting this in practice? So we're proud that scholars, of course, as UMass Amherst, contributed to this publication and to have their expertise on our campus. As I said, this is a place in which we want to have that kind of a community. I would say that in many cases we already do, but we know that community continues to evolve. And what defines and what is its distribution of demographics, as well as preferences, as well as beliefs, as well as culture, it changes and it evolves as we get 5,000 new students every year and about 100 faculty members every other year when you think in the average. They bring with themselves a different perspective. I am one of those faculty members and administrators that joined just 6 months ago, and I'm sure that in some of my questions to the campus, there's that, why would he be asking that, or why would he be saying that? And it's just the different perspectives that you bring when you come from the outside, and I think that's incredibly important to understand. But I'd like to especially congratulate the book's editor, all of whom are members of the Anti-Racist Community Engagement Research Group, for their receipt of the 2023 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award from the International Association for Research on Service, Learning, and Community Engagement. Bravo. That doesn't come just on its own. It's hard work, it's leadership, it's making sure that you are connecting to your community of practice, to your scholarship, and that people are noticing and the impact that you're having as a group. And now with this book, I think it's just beginning. And I look forward to seeing how this continues to grow. And you know that in this university, in UMass Amherst, all of our panelists, of course, our faculty who have participated, but everyone who is joining us here today, you have in UMass Amherst as a university, an advocate for this messaging, an advocate for this mindset, and we're here to help, and we're here to engage with you now and in the future. So thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you, Joseph, for inviting me to participate today. It's always an honor. I have to say this, and this is more on a personal note rather than on related to the panel. But when Maritza, my wife, and I came to visit, and then when we decided and we were given the opportunity to join UMass, there were 2 individuals that raised their hand and made us feel like we were at home immediately, and that's Joseph and Mari, and I would actually say Mari first, Joseph. So they were immediately reaching out. So thank you very much, and immediately we got to work together and engage in these specific areas. And I can't wait to see what also Joseph is leading our Carnegie community engagement efforts, and we're looking forward to working with him on that. So again, busy person, an incredible individual, an incredible panel, an incredible book, an incredible audience, and I can't wait to see how this continues to grow and really, really, not only in UMass Amherst, but across different spaces. So thank you very much. Have a great panel today. Have a great presentation. Have a great gathering. And if I don't get to see you before, happy holidays to all of you. I know it's early, but believe it or not, it's December already. And believe it or not, it's December already. So if I don't get to see you, happy holidays, and the best wishes for all of you and all your families in the new year. So thank you very much.
So next up to talk about the book is Christina Santana. And Dr. Santana is an associate professor of English at Worcester State University. She earned her doctorate at Arizona State University in 2016, specializing in community writing, rhetorics, and literacies. Her professional life has included time spent as the writing director of Worcester State, as an associate director of community learning in the Center for Community Engagement at Amherst College, and currently she's here at UMass Amherst for the fall semester as a visiting lecturer teaching CESOL, our Civic Engagement Service Learning class, Learning Through Community Engagement. As the lead editor of the book, she was instrumental in imagining a book on anti-racist community engagement that had a distinct focus on transformative practices. How do we do this? I think Christina was constantly saying that. And it's quite easy to say that the book is excellent, due in a large part to the amazing authors, but also in a large part to Christina's editorial leadership. So please join me in welcoming Christina Santana.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I had the distinct privilege to drive this book. The 8 co-editors, one of which is in the audience also, hi John, we all worked as a team. They trusted my leadership, and we all showed up. And it was so hard, 21 months from book proposal to print, very intense, but very life-giving. So, good morning. Let me tell you a little bit about this book. So, it is the culmination of years of work and dialogue with colleagues committed to anti-racist community engaged actions regionally and across the country. Since 2019, we've prepared grants, developed curriculum and programs, written policies and protocols, and founded a regional consortium, all to move our campuses toward more equitable community engagement and fuller recognition of faculty, students, community of color, Indigenous communities doing anti-racist community engagement, and everyone who would show up. This included the development of the principles that became the basis of the book. That original project was focused on better understanding and aligning the needs of students and community partners. It took place over the period of 7 months. It included teams on 4 university campuses across the state of Massachusetts. That's Salem State, Worcester State, Fitchburg State, and UMass Amherst. It also included piles of research on anti-racist teaching, learning, and research, as much data as we could get to understand how universities understood and responded to the needs and experiences of their minoritized students, and focus groups with students and community partners. So the effect of that work was a series of statements organized into 4 parts or principles that comprehensively capture and define what anti-racist community engagement looks like when the voices of students and community partners are centered. Allow me to quickly summarize. So number one calls upon us to shift power dynamics and lift up and value the perspectives and voices of the community instead of the university. Principle 2 calls on us to not only understand our positionality and bias, but also to more fully acknowledge and understand the historic roots of systemic racism, white supremacy, and colonial oppression. Principle 3 calls upon us to rethink our approach to community-engaged courses so that they have an anti-racist approach in their content, student preparation, the roles of community partners and students, and assessment. And then Principle 4 asks practitioners to create classrooms that acknowledge contributions by students and meet them where they are. Those 4 principles form the structure of the book, and the author's contributions build on and breathe life into the principles. With the help of our sponsor, Campus Compact, we put out a call for this collection, and we got 91 abstracts. It was very overwhelming. The journey to the 22 chapters that you can find in the book was undertaken by pairs of co-editors. Each pair was composed of one BIPOC and one white co-editor who assumed responsibility for editing the chapters related to one of the 4 principles. That's why there's 8 of us, although we were all working together already. As a group, we were very committed to highlighting work that exemplified collaboration and co-authorship among community, university members, and students. Diversity in as many forms as possible, that's institutional, geographical, ethnic and racial, and gender diversity. And importantly, all chapters had to have the potential to offer useful, clear descriptions of anti-racist community engaged practices. This was the biggest sticking point. We were really looking for authors doing bold and brave relational work that could be broken down into choices and decisions that were infused with apparent anti-racist values. Given the focus on practices, we felt it was imperative that readers would have handholds to replicate anti-racist community engagement in their own spaces, to undo white supremacy in higher education, disrupt the status quo, intervene in problematic thinking, and offer up alternatives for more equitable and inclusive experiences. Overall, the chapters demonstrate how the authors implement one or more of the anti-racist principles in their own work. The chapters are structured by first outlining a case, then the practices the authors use to address the case, and finally the connections their work has to broader contexts of pedagogical, curricular, institutional, and community change. On behalf of the co-editor team, I'll say that we are humbled to lift up the incredible authors whose work is simply organized by the principles in the book and the 3-part structure. It is through their examples that we are able to more fully see what anti-racist community engagement looks like. Finally, now that this book exists, it is something to show up for. You're all here, you showed up. Thank you so much for coming out. Showing up tells us a lot about our values, doesn't it? As Tim Eatman in the foreword says, the people who are drawn into civic and community engagement tend to deeply value showing up for each other. When we bring students into relationships with community partners, it is because we want them to learn to show up with the people in their lives that make up their community. That resonates, doesn't it? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. That's amazing. You know, we've been involved in the book as editor for a long time, but every time you present on it, I think there's the illumination of all the points of light that it really has is really important. So thank you. So a couple things in your program. In the back of your program is a QR code that you could get the book for a 20% discount from Campus Compact if you're looking to get it. So that's one of the QR codes in the back. Okay, so now we will start with our author panel. So I'd like to invite our authors to come up to the front desk. And so there are 2 sets of authors presenting today, and we'll have each of them present and then open the floor to Q&A. So our first authors today are Deborah Keitch and Maurice Poe. Now, Deborah is joining us via Zoom, so she's up there in the corner. And I'm going to try to see if I can pin her now. I don't know if that does anything, but that might be good. Okay. So Deborah Keitch is a senior lecturer and director of the Community Scholars Program at UMass Amherst. Deborah has been immersed in the field of education for over 2 decades as a practitioner, researcher, and activist, and is committed to research and teaching practices that support the work of social change. Maurice Poe is a psychology and English major and a member of the Community Scholars Program at UMass Amherst. In the spring of 2022, Maurice was a co-facilitator for the Community Conversation Series, which brought together UMass students and representatives from local community organizations in conversations about white supremacy culture and healing justice, which is also the topic of the chapter. So Deborah and Maurice and their co-authors, Carlia Dulcine and Lindy Shabeko, contributed the chapter Doing the Work, making space for undergraduate students to participate in anti-racist community engagement. The chapter features reflections by Maurice and Carlia, two BIPOC undergraduate student leaders who, by collaborating with community leaders to plan and run a series of student community conversations about anti-racism, discovered that their own cultural wealth provided a basis for them to, in their own words, do the work of disrupting white supremacy and making space for healing justice. So join me in welcoming Deborah and Maurice.
I'm going to start, and Maurice and I will go back and forth a little bit about our chapter. I'm going to provide a little bit of the broader context. So our chapter emerged from the work of the same grant that launched this book project that Christina just talked about, supporting research and sharing findings about anti-racist community engagement. Our co-author, Linda Sabeko, who couldn't be here today, and I were on that initial faculty research team. There are many tasks of the grant, but one of them was conducting focus groups with students of color at UMass who were involved in community-based learning all through our classes at Cecil. There were lots of significant findings from those focus groups, but something that surprised us was that many of the students, despite being immersed in social justice classes and being active in community work, didn't feel like they were actually, quote unquote, doing the work of anti-racism. So that was on our mind, that finding was on our mind when we entered another phase of the grant, which was the creation of what we called a community conversation series that would bring together students and community partners to talk about anti-racism in this work. At that point, two of the students from the initial focus groups, Maurice Poe and another student, Carlia Dulcine, joined the team for this conversation series planning. And we, as a team, met for several months to plan this event. There were also two community partners on this team, Vanessa Martinez from the Women of Color Health Equity Collective and Marissa Peasy from the Abortion Rights Fund of Western Mass. They are two of our existing community organizations that we work with. So our chapter emerged both from that particular finding that students felt like they weren't doing the work, but also our desire to highlight the arc of Maurice and Carlia's experience from that initial focus group throughout their co-planning and then their co-facilitation of the conversation series, which was really spanning over a year. So Maurice, can you share a little bit about that feeling that you weren't doing the work of anti-racism? Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Well, this is loud. Yeah. Thank you, Deborah. Basically, so yeah, at this conversation, I was a part of the focus group that Deborah described 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, I'm currently a senior. 2 years ago, I was a sophomore. And I think there was a lot of stuff going on at UMass with anti-racist emails and I essentially, like COVID and everything, but I essentially felt like there was kind of a lot of stuff going on to feel like it's hard to really do the work. And I also individually am someone who like grew up in a predominantly white space, just like all my life, K through 12. So again, I didn't really feel like I had the qualifications to really do anti-racist work because I didn't think that I had the stereotypical like black experience. So even during the focus group, I was kind of confused, like, why do they want me to, talk about this work? Because I didn't really feel like I was bringing anything. But I think what was interesting was the biggest ask. I think that Deborah and like a lot of the leaders in the focus groups brought was that the biggest ask was basically just to be present and participate in a conversation. And I was like, I can do that. And I don't think it clicked in my head that was valuable work. It's just like, I'm just talking. So I don't think there was a point where I was just like, this is doing the work, until later down the path, I'm like, shoot, there's a lot of value in like conversating. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest things with that. And I don't know if you want me to transition to the practice. Yeah, so basically what we did, I guess that transitions into, I think what Deborah kind of was alluding to about the really powerful ways in which calling like on people who feel like unqualified and all this stuff. She basically invited us after the focus group to participate in, at the time, what was called the Anti-Racist Day of Service. And again, like the planning committee was Carlia, Vanessa, Marissa, and Deborah and Joseph, I think, were a part of the planning team too. And initially, it was this idea of this anti-racist day of service that would be funded, I think, with a grant. But I think we had a little pushback, and we would meet like monthly to like figure out this anti-racist day of service. But after, I think, the first conversation together as a group, we had a little pushback with this idea where it's like a day of service, where it's like after the day, is it like, are we just not anti-racist anymore? So we were just like, all right, let's, try and develop this a little bit more. And that eventually evolved into what became the Community Conversation series. And that basically was a 3-meeting event where in the first meeting, which was on April 4th of 2022, we had a 2-hour Zoom gathering where students and community partners came together to participate in activities and conversations about healing justice and white supremacy. So to kind of go into the specifics, Vanessa led an activity in that group on just like white supremacy and the characteristics of white supremacy, which is a website published by Tima Oken, and the ways that it like presents itself. So like different pillars, thinking about like senses of urgency and all these other ways in which we don't necessarily think that white supremacy presents itself. So that was a really valuable activity, and I think following that, Marissa led an activity on healing justice, and after that, we kind of like did this breakout session where students and their community partners could talk about the ways that those things present themselves in their work, and the ways that it's not really happening in their work and what they can do better. And what we really found after hearing from both groups was that those conversations aren't really happening. And that was like really the first time that that was at the forefront, like within like those conversations. So that was really cool to see. And that was just the first meeting. The second meeting was a week after that, where we had another 2-hour Zoom meeting on April 11th, 2022, where we gathered the students and community partners again, but instead we met separately to engage in reflective work. So that one essentially was the community leaders, which was Vanessa and Marissa. They led the community leaders, and me and Carlia led the student group. And we essentially came back and we talked with the students what went well, like throughout the last week we met, and like what are some things that we're thinking about, what are things and ways that we can do better. And that was just a really nice activity, just to essentially also talk about what we can do as UMass students, just to continue the work. And in the third meeting, it was an in-person social gathering just to continue the conversation and talk about next steps. So I think there was, just a really dynamic and just relational work that like happened through our whole experience. So yeah. And I guess if I was like going to go into my personal things, I don't know if you want to say anything, Deborah, or. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, it's different being on Zoom and, feedback. Cut me off if you need me. But yeah, so I think like when it comes to the connections element and like the impact that I think a lot of it had on me, again, I think I would go back to the first thing that I said, where I was a sophomore at the time. I'm a senior now. And even like being here, like I still feel, I don't know, my psych professor told me not to say imposter syndrome, but imposter phenomena. But I think it's like this weird idea of feeling like I wasn't necessarily thinking that I was like qualified to do this work. And even like I'm a student on like this panel with like all these like great people. Yet there's so much value in like, I think Deborah and others being like, hey, like there's something valuable about the work that you're doing. And like, I want to uplift that. So I guess when it comes to the connections element, I think it's really allowed me to take that idea of like calling on other people and uplifting them to the spaces that I'm in. I am partnered with Gardening the Community in Springfield, Mass, which essentially works with high schoolers in the Springfield area, and we just garden and talk about inequities and stuff like that. And I think it's so awesome to use essentially like what Deborah and like everyone else here at UMass did, and just use that to encourage and uplift all the students that I work with, and be like, well, you guys are like really, really smart. You're brilliant. You are doing amazing things. And it kind of like contributes to the cycle of other people uplifting and contributing to the anti-racist work that is already being done. So yeah, I think that's the way that I feel like that's me doing the work in the little ways, but also in the big ways over time. So yeah, I think that's what I'll say there. Deborah, I don't know if you have anything else.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to speak briefly to how we do this work within the confines of the university, and all the ways in which the university is, as it is structured, creates barriers to doing this work. It's really challenging to do anti-racist community-based learning for all the obvious reasons. In the university, for all the obvious reasons, this work needs to be deep and it needs to be sustained. And that is really difficult given the prevailing culture of urgency in the university, the chronology of the university semester versus the year-round work that community orgs are doing. It requires ongoing relationships and ongoing conversations with community orgs. So someone has to be holding those as students come in and out, they leave the university and new students come in. And just the time it requires, as you can imagine, scheduling the Zooms with all of those people was probably one of the hardest parts of the project, getting everyone together at the same time. And yet, just in those 3 conversations, or the conversations that happened over that time period, both the students and the community organization reps said that this was some of the most powerful conversations on racism and ways to disrupt it that they had ever had. And that just making space for these few conversations was transformative for them. So it's not impossible. I think we just have to find time where we can to do it. Maurice, any final thoughts?
I guess like kind of what Deborah was saying. Yeah, I think, I think someone said it before, like the fact that everyone is here today, and like actively engaging in conversation and dialogue like this, I think that's a huge component to like doing the work, and like continuing the work that is being done. But yeah, I think it also is a process, and I think we need to value just like the little ways, like the conversations. I think I think UMass at least was really great. There was actually a session earlier in the semester. I think Loretta Ross came onto campus, and she talked about like calling out culture, and that's like a little thing that we just like do regularly, where it's like you don't really. I think my sophomore me wouldn't have thought of that as like significant work, but that's significant work, and I think it's just like the slow yet important process of just like constantly doing those little things and addressing those things to in turn in the long run do a lot of work in the future. So yeah, those are my last words, and yeah.
Thanks to everybody. Thanks, Maurice.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So our next up is Lucinda Canty and Rayanne LeBlanc. And Lucinda Canty is an associate professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst in the Elaine Marieb College of Nursing and a director of SeedWorks Equity and Nursing Program. Dr. Canty is a certified nurse midwife and a national nurse leader in Black maternal health. Rayanne LeBlanc is SeedWorks Endowed Associate Clinical Professor of Social Justice in Nursing, also here at UMass Amherst at the Marieb College of Nursing. Dr. LeBlanc is committed to advancing social justice in nursing and through collaborative and collective action. Nurses of Color's Voices, Storytelling and Listening in Anti-Racist Educational Practice was the chapter that Lucinda and Rayanne, with their co-authors Frankie Manning, Sharon Lattimore Mosley, and Gail Robinson, contributed to the book. They demonstrate the importance of collaborating with community of nurses to expand traditional nursing curriculum by amplifying the voices and experiences of nurses of color to reckon with racism and prepare the next generation. Particularly, this chapter helps readers envision how they might center the lived experience of BIPOC practitioners in their field and discipline. Join me in welcoming Lucinda and Rayanne.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So we're going to talk about our chapter, Nurses of Color Voices, Storytelling and Listening in Anti-Racist Educational Practice. And just would like to acknowledge our co-authors, Sharon Lattimore Mosley, Frankie Manning, and Gail Robinson. Together, we worked on this project, and we're going to share our purpose and the process that we used to capture the stories that we did. The history of nurses of color is not often discussed, is not a part of nursing curriculum. And so someone as myself, a Black nurse, nursing student, I didn't hear stories. So I've only heard about Florence Nightingale. And, and just going throughout my nursing education, not having any faculty of color, not seeing anyone until even my doctoral program. Can you imagine all the way up, I only had one nursing faculty of color. Can you imagine? And I did not hear any stories of anyone outside of white nurses and nurse midwives. I didn't hear any of those stories. And it wasn't until I did things on my own that I began to learn. So around 2020, I would say the fall of 2020, a group of nurses got together and wanted to do, this project came out of a larger project called the Overdue Reckoning, Addressing Racism in Nursing. And we really wanted to, George Floyd just happened, Breonna Taylor, COVID really highlighted the racial disparities that existed, that have always been there. Some people think it was new with COVID, but they have always been there, but we just didn't talk about it. And so we wanted to do something, and part of that something was creating a platform. We had a 5-week Zoom sessions where we centered the voices of nurses of color and their experiences with racism, and and what we wanted so that we could be successful to care for those that we cared for. And in this we had a very already testing, disrupting the system. We had about 60%, each session had about 110 to 120 nurses. 60% were white nurses, the rest were nurses of color, all races and ethnicities combined. For these discussions, white nurses could not speak. So only the nurses of color had the platform. And by doing that, we created a safe space for us to share our stories. And what we learned, we had nursing students all the way up into Frankie Manning, who's, is her picture here? Yes, sorry. Her picture is here. She's 86 now. And so she had over 60 years of nursing experience. So this space consisted of that. But we realized there were a lot of similarities in our stories. And one thing for me was, I was like, if I was a nursing student and I heard these stories, who would I have become? What would I have done in my nursing education? Challenges that I had, how would I have handled them if I knew that I was not alone and that someone else lived this experience and survived it and excelled? So we wanted to find a way that we could share those stories, and that led to our project that we're going to talk about today and how we were able to create this documentary project. And it's entitled Reckoning with Racism in Nursing. We interviewed 37 nurses of color, and we developed, all their interviews are archived, and we're going to talk about our process, but we also have, their interviews are available online, and we created 7 mini documentaries, and we're in the process of creating a longer version. And so this project really sought to address the silence of racism in nursing. And this is a quote from Ms. Frankie Manning. If we cannot ourselves get to the point that we're looking at our lives as human beings, not in the terms of what the other person is, Black, Latino, white, Asian, we will not overcome the legacy of racism.
So I'm just going to talk about, hi everyone, the goals of this project, and I'm sort of going to read them to you, but I'll also highlight some aspects of this. So free the voices of nurses of color to discover how racism has affected their professional lives. And so we used the medium of first-person storytelling. And while we're talking about this in terms of our profession of nursing, of course this can be applied to any discipline or profession, and sort of the model that we used. We wanted to develop, and we did naturally, a community of nurses to build an archive of stories that can be accessed, and we have that through our website and many other projects that followed this. Share insights publicly through the website and documentaries, and invite interested people to symposia to learn about the intergenerational history of racism in the U.S. nursing particularly.
So to create this community of trust, and for myself and those of us who are on this committee, we didn't want anyone harmed and traumatized in this process. We wanted people to feel like they were in control. Because I can even think about times that I participated in a project and I never heard what happened with my information. I didn't know where it landed and if it was safe. And so we made sure that we did not move forward without the nurses of color being a very integral part of the process. So from the very beginning, we're upfront, we're sharing stories. You know, we want to hear your experiences. And anytime that you want to leave this project, you can leave this project. Anytime that you want to stop, anything that you said and you're like, I don't want to say that, you're going to have full control. So every step of the process, they were involved. First getting that initial consent. Then we interviewed them at their convenience. These nurses were from all over the United States. So when you got an email, the time zone from each Eastern, I even learned now, I know what Mountain Time is. I didn't really understand. I learned all the different time zones because we wanted it convenient for a time for them to have the interview. And we had a production team that came in. We did all of this through Zoom because we were still in the height of COVID. But even after that first interview, it was transcribed and we gave it to the storyteller. So and we told them, is there anything that you want to take out? Some people took out their employee, where they worked. Some of them took out where they lived. And there was someone who told the story of her sister who was also a nurse. And she said, my sister needs to tell her own story. So those pieces were removed. So they looked at the transcript, and then we looked at the video, and we took out those pieces, and then we showed it to them again. And then even when we created the final product, we showed it to them again. And out of all the nurses that we interviewed, we only had one nurse who wanted to have her video, but only because when she told her story, she realized that she could sue. I don't know how to say that in a better way. So anyways, her video became evidence. I'll just say it that way. But all the other nurses, no one complained of feeling like they weren't respected. They felt empowered. Even there was a nurse who is in an administrative position, and she was like, yes, I said that, and I'm glad that I got it out. So everyone felt empowered to even speak up in their own, in their own way, or share their video, or just talk within their organizations about the work. And even projects developed that they wanted to do on their own in this anti-racism space. But for us to create this, we had to listen, and we're going to talk a little bit in more detail about that. And we're sharing the information. And also, when we share the stories or the documentary, we do let the people who were involved in that piece know that we're going to share it. And they could participate if they would like to, but we just wanted them to know. And so we do have a website, and we are continuing to have what we call our voices, some workshops that we're using to share the video and have discussion.
Yeah, so we want to talk about some of our stories, and again, we welcome you to visit the website and reach back to us. And just the medium of storytelling itself, centering the first person, and recognizing the conditions to allow story to unfold. So we really wanted to, we had support for this as well through the Story Center with the process. And the big part of this too, of course, is listening practices, and people talk about radical listening or being present, but also that in order to care about this work, we have to listen to one another. And while we're talking about a lot of different projects, our team, our core team, we did a lot of work together around listening to each other. This took an enormous amount of time, just being in relation and respect of how we listen, how we show up, again, that theme, and how we have these discussions on racism. And so, do you want to say anything more, Lucinda, about the stories? Or?
Yes, yeah, so we have, I don't know if the link will work, but we do have it in the PowerPoint and we can share that. But I just want to say, even the process of working on this chapter, and I would like to really thank Dr. Santana, because she really helped us see the value in our experiences. Like what Maurice was saying, sometimes you don't realize that you do the work, but to have someone really pull out the key things that you're doing and acknowledging it and showing that it's valuable. And sometimes it's not even only just about the story, it's just that you're having the opportunity to tell it. And to be able to tell it and have people listen. Because I think when we're in that anti-racism space, I can tell you times in the past where I start to say experience that I had, and can you imagine someone saying, "Are you sure? I was there and I didn't see it that way." Or, "Oh, I know that person, she's not that way." And this is what my experience throughout nursing. And it can go into any profession. But to be able to share your story and say, and just have people just listen. And then after they listen, they process it and say, "You know, I didn't understand until you shared your story." And to me, that was the most powerful piece of this project. And being able to write out what we did, that process was very, very important to us.
Yeah, I just want to say Christina was an amazing editor, like just amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, really.
Yes. Yes, and I'll just share, I'll wrap up with this, but I was thinking as Maurice shared his story, you know, when we were first approached to do this, and I want to thank Rayanne for her leadership in this chapter, both of you. I was like, this is my first book chapter. And I was like, am I going to be able to do this? But then with their guidance, the process was not painful at all, not at all. So, and I'm grateful for the final product and this book, because I feel like this entire book it just shows again how valuable our experiences are and how the simple actions can really have an impact in your community and how we educate and work with not only students, but each other.
So why don't you hang on to that for the Q&A that we're going to do right now. So if you can just pass that along, and I'll be the MC here. So thank you again. Thank you for the amazing presentation. For both of those presentations, you can see that these are just 2 chapters in the book, and the book has many different approaches, many different communities that folks are working with, from faculty to students to community partners. So we have a little time for some questions. So I was wondering if there are any questions out there for any of the panelists, and I've got.
Hello, thank you so much for all your work and amazing speeches. I just wanted to ask for like an example of like an experience in the nursing chapter, or like an experience of the nursing women of color. Like, you know, is there any kind of stories or any like small ones or anything? Because I would love to hear like what experiences and what they learned, or I don't know, just something like that would be cool.
Well, we in the website too will be kind of helpful, but we do have the mini documentaries which were thematic analyses, so such as patient race bias. Can you think of the other names of them?
Yeah, academia, that was a big one. Yeah. So I would say, and I'm just thinking of some of the interviews and why it's so important to kind of create the space. And we were able to create this over Zoom. You know, later we were able to meet in person, and we feel like we've known each other for years. But just having nurses say, you know, I don't think I have anything important to say. I'm thinking of what Maurice said earlier. And then we start the interview, and I just say, you know, what brought you to nursing? And they just open up. And then after, and it's like 30 minutes, an hour later, they're like, oh, I didn't expect to talk that much. But I think it just really empowered, like you could see it throughout, like they're nervous and they don't think it's gonna be important what I have to say. And then at the end say, you know, I realized that that is something important that happened to me. And with this, it's not only looking at the problems, but it's also looking at how they got through it. And then reliving that, you know, I went through this, but I made it. And I'm, you know, like years of trying to become a manager. And then finally you get that breakthrough. You know, I didn't give up. I kept, you know, trying, and then now I'm the manager. And even one of our participants, she actually became a dean in the process. And so, you know, just again, years of challenges to get tenure, to be seen, and then now she's a dean of a college. So it's just that's one of the parts that are so important with telling stories, is that people don't realize what they lived. And when you see that in their eyes and you see that in how they're so confident and so proud of themselves, for me, that was priceless.
Yeah, and just to say, like, people, we had a lot of activity, very engaged, I mean, with one another. And yeah, so we had experiences from across the country and, you know, from different disciplines, and it's just a huge range, yeah, really profound.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that question. So any question maybe for Maurice and Deborah before we break for?
Hi, this is a question for Maurice. And I think those of us at UMass know about our structural barriers and how they can be ominous. And I'm wondering how you cut across those to have your community conversations.
I think that's a great question. And I think it's interesting because I'm taking it. So I think to answer the question, I'd say the first thing that I think does the most work, I think, is faculty. Like Deborah, I think, really contributed. Deborah, Joseph, Ellen, literally everyone in the Cecil department. Like, I think they just make it where there doesn't feel like there's any barriers. Like, it's very much working alongside you, going at your speed, understanding, like, you have a lot of stuff going on. And I think that is a lot of the work. And I think it's even interesting because I'm in another program right now. Because I was in the Community Scholars program, and now I'm in a psychology program, which is Advancing Diversity in Research and Practice. And in that program, it's a graduate student teaching the class, and she'll express how, like, she wants to get samples of, like, diverse participants. However, since we are at a predominantly white institution, she's just like, oh, I can't really get the participant number that I want because I won't graduate in time. And that's, like, a big structure in place that, where it's like, why is, like, the graduation time, like, the barrier to, like, have a sample that you just want to be representative? So I don't know. I think it's faculty, and I don't know, also making accommodations to, you know, make the work actually enjoyable and fun and work at the speed of the student. So yeah, I think that's how I got around those structures.
Great, thank you so much, Maurice. So maybe one more question.
Thank you. I know it's strange. I'm curious to hear what maybe this is the wrong way to phrase it, but the intended or what you're hoping the impact is on this community of UMass. Is it, and I think it's easy to say, like, oh, you know, well, we're going to work towards becoming an anti-racist campus. But I guess what I'm looking for more is, like, you guys were doing workshops that were super helpful. Is this maybe an iterative process that you hope to be continued between faculty and staff, but also continued between students? I guess I'm wondering kind of where can we go from here with this great work that you started?
I feel like, I don't know if that's a question for us, and I don't know if Deborah also will have an answer.
Deborah, you want to respond to that at all, or? Maurice?
I can't hear. Oh, I guess I'll say something. I don't know if she's muted as well. But yeah, I think. Oh, what?
Go ahead, Deborah.
No, Maurice, go.
Okay. There's a lot of feedback. Yeah, but I think, at least for me, I think the intention is to continue having the conversations. And I think, like, that idea, like the Community Scholars Program, like, is a program where students are constantly engaging, like, with organizations, yet there's not really anyone who's going to, I guess, police, like, whether or not, like, you are having conversations that are centered around anti-racism. So I think to encourage students to have that be, like, at their forefront, where it's like, am I thinking about this? Or are we kind of just, like, doing the work just to do the work? Which, is that even doing the work? I don't know. Yeah, so I think it's just, like, to bring that idea to the forefront and just have anti-racism, like, constantly on people's minds. but Deborah, I don't know if you have a more structured.
Yeah, I would say that I agree, and I think that the conversations themselves. I was actually, as someone who's been involved in storytelling and all sorts of dialogic approaches, I was still found myself surprised at the power of these conversations, and I was hearing that reflected too in the other authors on the panel who were talking about the power of stories being able to be shared. But even in that initial focus group we did with students of color, and in that space, that I should say that focus group was facilitated by a faculty person of color as well, and I was present during that, and they knew I was present, but I was just there to sort of take notes and transcribe. But I didn't have my video on, so it could really be a space that students felt like, at least visibly, was for them. And one of the things that came out, just the focus group, the students felt, they said they've never had a time to be together in such a group and like have these kind of directed questions around their experience of race and racism and how to disrupt it, and they found it really empowering. Just that focus group was really empowering. And so yeah, I think the idea of trying to make, just really, it's not hard to make more spaces for students to have those conversations, for faculty and staff to have those conversations, for there to be opportunities for affinity groups, for folks to make sure that they're in spaces that they feel like they can speak freely in. I can't emphasize enough the importance of those conversations.
Thank you. Do you guys have anything to respond to this?
Just want to say that we know anti-racism, because of all the structures, all the things that are embedded, it's going to take time. But any space that we can be in and talk about this, and again, I can't emphasize enough how people, you showing up, and that says a lot. It says a lot, I'm sure, for even Maurice to see who showed up today, and that's empowering for us as well. But I think that one thing that we have to realize is that people are in different journeys, I guess, when it comes to being anti-racist. But I feel like this textbook, the principles, can relate to you whether you're in the beginning of looking at this or if you've been doing this for a while. So I just want to say, like, it's going to be a process that's going to continue, and it's not going to end when people just leave. When this is over, there's gonna be things that you'll think about, things you'll consider. When you interact with a student, you're gonna think about, oh, I heard this earlier, Maurice said this, so let me make sure the student knows they're valuable when they're showing up. So I just wanna say that it is a continuous process.
Yeah. Oh, I just want everyone's responses was, I think, just really beautiful. And I think for me, what's ringing in my mind is like, we need to normalize conversations about anti-racism. Like, we need to normalize that we are part of these projects. We need to be uncomfortable all the time, and we need to make other people uncomfortable productively. I think that should be the goal.
Well, that's a great way to end this panel, and also to take a break, because we're all going to get very uncomfortable for the next hour, it seems, right? So, but I just want to hope you can join me in applauding the amazing panelists and the great presentation.